I am honored to interview another inspirational woman from the Muslim community. About a year ago, I came across her when she appeared on Women's AM Islam channel. She is a woman of many talents and roles, such as poet, writer, multimedia freelance journalist, photographer, mediator and trainer in conflict resolution. She is here today to talk about her poetry and views on current affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the one and only Hodan Yusuf.
Hey, thank you. Hi.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you very much for coming to talk to me today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
We finally get to do this interview after a very long time. Alhamdulillah.
Yes, alhamdulillah. It was meant to be today.
So, we should begin by speaking about your poetry, of course. As a poet who is very passionate about making a difference in the world, can you start off by explaining what sort of issues you engage with in your poetry?
People often ask me this, and I always write about the things that matter to me, whether that's racism, identity, immigration, police brutality, or love, nature, family. It's everything that my life is encompassed of.
Very interesting indeed, Hodan. Next, on a website called Creative Girls, where one of your poems was published, it stated that your poetry stands for justice, equality, and Islamic rights. Was there a particular experience in life which encouraged you to pick up the pen?
I was very honored when they wrote that. Actually, I felt a bit embarrassed that and honored at the same time that they'd seen my poetry in that light. And I can't remember a single specific incident, but I know that I've been writing poetry for as long as I can remember, ever since I was a child. Didn't necessarily share it with people, but definitely was writing from a very young age.
Thank you for that amazing answer. Very inspiring. Okay, it's now time to talk about your poetry. You produced a fantastic poem for International Women's Day, entitled A Woman's Day. Would you like to read a few lines?
Yes, the poem's called Every Day is Women's Day, and last year I wrote only half of that poem. And then this year I was asked to come and speak in Parliament for an event that was being held on the eve of International Women's Day, and I couldn't help but add to the poem. And it was important to me to address things that had happened in the year that had gone by, including Grenfell, and be able to share that in the poem, in the heart of government. So yeah, I'll read a small bit from that poem. Every day is Women's Day. Every day is Women's Day. Wake up and deal with my Women's Day. There's a special place in hell for women who let other women burn like in the fires and horrors of Grenfell. But few of those bucks reaching the hands that lost loved ones and dwellings, homes and belongings, and the death toll shrinks, as if those who died come back to wipe the ink from the toll. And in the words of Michael Ikwaja Omario Jr., did you think we forgot about them as well? There's a special place in history for women who snatch the ladder from under other women when they have climbed to a place of safety, and the milk from the mouths of their babes as well. Every day is Women's Day, every day is Women's Day. Wake up and deal with my Women's Day. So that's the section.
Thank you. Very strong and inspirational words. My favorite line was, the death toll shrieks, as if those died, came back, and wiped the ink from the toll. Hodan, I couldn't help but notice your reference to the urban music artist Stormzy too, which is why I would like to ask, what is your opinion on the government's role in the Grenfell tragedy?
Oh, it's so painful. The inquiry's still going on, so I can't comment on the outcomes of it, but from what we all witnessed, it was almost like those people were set up to die. The way that the cladding, it goes through the poorer neighborhoods, people who are more marginalized communities, the fact that Grenfell was a building that had black and minority ethnic people predominantly living there, suffering there and dying there. And the lack of resources from the government, the fact that they made false promises about how they were going to rehouse people, but very few of those people have been rehoused. It's a tragedy. What happened was a tragedy. What happened was negligence. What happened was criminal, actually. And then the way that people have been neglected in the aftermath is even more shocking. So the government has a lot to answer for. And people like the rapper Low-Key and other people are using their profiles to talk about this issue and bring more attention to the criminal aspects of what the government has done in the richest borough of this entire country. It's awful.
Thanks for that fantastic answer. Let's now talk about how culture can impact our lives. In the debate about shame on Islam channel, you mentioned it's really problematic when we value our children in what they do, not who they are. From your perspective, why are expectations so high for children in our society?
I think it's twofold. A lot of it depends on who we're talking about. So in that particular interview that you quote, I was referring mainly to immigrant communities, so people from immigrant backgrounds. And when our parents and our grandparents came to these islands, we still do, working twice as hard to earn half as much. And so parents put a lot of value on children gaining an education and achieving, because they know how difficult it is to sustain your life as a black, minority, ethnic, marginalized person in this racist, discriminatory society that they found themselves in. So I think a lot of the time it comes from a place of love, really, the parents having these expectations, but it can translate, the modes in which parents do that can translate to be quite harsh sometimes and deny children a lot of the childhood, really. A lot of the benefits of being a child, the innocence of childhood is replaced with a lot of pressures, psychological pressure of achieve this, do this, become this, rather than looking at the child as this is who you are and I love you for who you are regardless. It is almost attainment based, and it can develop an unhealthy relationship with between parents and children, in my experience, and it's anecdotal and it's not speaking for all of the communities that I've mentioned, but some of the experiences that I was referring to in that particular interview were about those kind of relationships. And actually today I read something about Norway and how in Norway the education system is designed differently, so the children are not so pressured in education because of the way that it's set up. And I think this country in particular has a lot to answer for as well, the way that education fails children anyway. So parents have to take on the roles that the education, the government has failed children. So I think that also couples, that also adds to the pressures that parents face in trying to get their kids to become the best versions of themselves. But at some point those two have to meet in the middle in a way that doesn't put too much pressure on children.
Thank you. On that note, you mentioned on the Islam channel about your admiration for the Surah Al-Hamza. It states, "Woe to every kind of scandalmonger and backbiter, who build up wealth and layeth it. By no means. He will be sure to be thrown into that which breaks to pieces." Can you please translate this ayat for us, and please explain why Surah Al-Hamza should inspire us all?
You've just translated it, so we'll go with your translation because I'm not a qualified mufassira, and I will be scared to add to the translation of the meaning of the Quran. But it speaks to, and it's, for me anyway, it's a constant reminder that we're socialized in putting other people down. Sometimes people feel better about themselves by putting other people down. And with a lot of social media that we have access to, as much as it is a force for good and helps a lot of us access things we couldn't access before, it also contributes to a lot of this FOMO, this feeling of people saying fear of missing out, people looking at other people's lives with envy in a way, and feeding off this culture of, also it plays the other way, that people are posting unrealistic portrayals of the lives that they have. So you'll find people take pictures with things they don't own, people that they're not with, where they will use filters to distort how they look. There's a lot of things which then other people looking can say, have a aspiration for something that is totally unattainable anyway. So I think it feeds into that, and people then, jealousy, backbiting, it's become part of our culture, and now we just have technology to help us do it quicker on a mass scale. And for me, it helps rein me in. When I think about those verses, and it stops me. The amount of times, trust me, that I'm tempted, that I see something and I think, oh, I'm just going to tell this friend, did you see what so-and-so said or what so-and-so did? And if there's no purpose to it, I will try and humble myself. And I'm not saying I always stop, but, Allah forgive us for our shortcomings. But these verses, and this one, and loads of other verses similar to that, help discipline our soul, and that's how I see it. It's not something, we're not perfect beings, only God is perfect, but those verses help me to discipline myself. And if people see me doing things which are incorrect, trust that there's been at least another 80% of the stuff that that has been controlled, that I haven't done because of God's reminders, and they're everywhere, not just in Quran. Sometimes other people will inspire and remind us to behave in a way that doesn't harm other people.
What an amazing and thought-provoking answer. You also mentioned in the debate, if who you are isn't enough, then that could lead to feeling of rebellion. The child doesn't feel like they belong and do not fit in. So, do you think by concentrating on children's strengths we could have a more resilient society?
Yeah, I definitely believe that. I definitely believe that if someone is constantly not valued for who they are, that it does lead to rebellion. It leads to loneliness. It can lead to rebellion. It can lead to loneliness. It can lead to emotional and mental health problems, because if we think about it, our families are the place when biologically we are born as completely dependent, and for love. We're dependent for love. We're dependent for a guardian, a primary carer, to tell us that we are loved, and to come to our aid when we cry, for instance, or just as infants. And I feel that if that is not nourished as the person gets older, and whatever needs they may have, whatever those needs are, if there isn't a emotional and physical system to say, it's cool, we've got you, we can work through this, we can do this, we've got each other, it can lead to a person feeling like, I need to rebel against this because these people are not here for me. And so I'm firm. I have children myself, and I'm not lecturing, I'm just speaking from experience. In that particular episode, it was something from my own experience that it was very, very important to me, that my children, no matter what, felt that they are loved and they are important for who they are. And I don't really care what academic or other qualifications that they come with. I'm not their employer. I'm not looking at their CV. I'm their mom. So it's important to me personally that people generally have someone in their life that says to them, I love you, you matter, you're important.
Thanks for that answer, Hodan. Let's now move on to mental health amongst the youth. During my research, I found the Mental Health Foundation as an incredible source. According to their studies, 70% of children with the condition will not receive appropriate treatment at an early age. Hodan, in your opinion, what contributes to mental health disorders like depression and anxiety?
I'm not a mental health expert, so I have to declare that I don't know. I'm a community mediator and these other things, but mental health is not one of my fields that I've studied. But in my opinion, I think a lot of us have a taboo around mental health issues. And I think that just like we understand what physical health can look like, if I have a cold, if I'm sneezing, we know the symptoms, we know that means somebody's got a cough or they're sneezing, that could be that they have a medical, physical problem with a cold or something. But somehow when it comes to mental health issues, we haven't been given those, we haven't been educated about these things. We haven't been told that if you feel this way, it could mean that you have this is an issue, that depression can manifest in this way, that anxiety can manifest in these ways. We haven't been taught those things from a young age. We've been taught that if you injure your skin or you need a plaster, we've never been told about our mental health. So, and also everybody has mental health. Everybody has physical health and everybody has mental health. Sometimes our mental health needs attention and sometimes our physical health needs attention. So I think it could be that some people are predisposed to these conditions, some people have them, and it's just they're inherently they have a mental health issue like with OCD, they've developed it somehow. People can have these conditions, but it's how we view the people with those conditions, how we remove the stigma from people with mental health conditions in our communities, which I feel very strongly about, and to remove the ableist language around mental health issues. Like, it's become part of our colloquialisms, and it's something that just only now I'm becoming more aware of, in terms of when we say, oh, that's crazy. Oh, that's, you know, are you mad? Yeah, and it becomes so inherently part of our colloquial language that it's going to take a while for us to remove those words and to replace them with other things, but at least to become conscious of the fact that there were certain terms which people used 20, 30 years ago, 15 years ago, which we've now understood to, no, we can't say those things. And in the same way, I think if we all collectively work towards changing the way we speak about mental health, that it will become easier for young people to admit when they're not feeling great, that it's not considered a sign of weakness, that is considered normal. Yes, you have a mental health problem, that's normal, here, and then signpost them to clinicians and medical practitioners who can assist them, and that therapy is not something that's embarrassing. You know, we need to remove the shame around these things. That will help, I think.
Thank you for your wonderful answer. According to the Mental Health Foundation, there are a number of reasons why people become depressed. For example, past childhood experiences, physical illness, employment, and more. Going back to the same statement you made in the debate on the Islam channel when you said, if who you are isn't enough, then that could lead to feelings of rebellion. Do you think teachers, and even parents, would benefit from completing a course on emotional awareness so they can support children more effectively?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, because yeah, that's genius. It's so important. It's so important, and I think schools might be the greatest avenue, actually, because where else are we going to get that? When parents have children, they don't come with manuals. When I buy a washing machine, it comes with a manual that tells me exactly how to load it, what detergent to put in it, what to do. But when you have this child and there's nothing, there's no one to tell you anything. So I think it's important, absolutely, and I think schools would be a great avenue to have these courses available free and accessible for people to be able to discuss, to learn about their children's emotional well-being and the things that they could do to contribute to that. For example, around exam season, the stress levels increase for young children, for young people, and at university even. It doesn't just stop at school. There's a lot of reports about the poor mental health of university students, especially in the first couple of years. And I think these things would be really important before we package our kids off to college, university, etc., to understand that there's going to be pressures, and how do we offset the already existing pressures. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that's genius, that's clever. Let that happen. How do we do that? Where do I sign? Where do I sign? Definitely.
Thank you for that amazing response. Now it's time to talk about racism, a topic close to your heart. According to Immigration Minister Caroline Noakes, almost 1,000 flights were booked to deport people back to the Caribbean. I find this Windrush scandal very disgusting. Do you therefore believe that people of African or Caribbean descent should be encouraged to speak out against injustice more often?
Yes, I mean, I constantly do, and I don't want to say that to burden people with speaking out against it, because I know that people are already living the trauma of the things that we're experiencing. So some people may choose to not speak about it in that way, but to resist it in different ways. And you know, I believe that every form of micro-resistance is as valid as the other. So some people may choose not to speak, but they may, for example, give money to the campaign, to fund campaigns that protest against these things. And it's disgusting. Like you said, what we're witnessing in 2018 is disgusting. And people are talking, some people are shocked that, oh, this is happening. But a lot of us have lived through different, it's almost like a cycle. We've seen this before. This has happened before. Now it's just come full circle where they're doing things unashamedly like they used to. My dad was here in the 60s as a student, and the things that he witnessed living, in this country at that time, it's those things haven't, it seems like nothing's changed. It's like a blip in history, and we're back to, go back to your own country, we're back to people who are citizens being stripped of their rights as citizens. It is horrifying, and I try and use my platforms to speak against these things all the time and whenever I can. But like I said before, I think it's important that people who choose not to speak about it, sometimes the trauma is so much, and we are often, as black and minority people, accused of, oh, you're pulling the race card, oh, you're using, but actually this is our lived experience. It's not that no one's pulling any card from anywhere. This is life. This is life. People are abused on buses. People are denied employment. People are being shipped to countries they've never been in because of who they're supposed to be, or countries that they left as infants, and they have no resources, no relatives, no way of sustaining themselves, and just being shipped out. People are being denied asylum and coming from countries that this country caused refugee crisis. So Iraqi people, you know, are being refused, for example, asylum so regularly. But how did Iraq get to the mess that it is today? It's because of the bombings and the war that Britain and its allies went in and did. So there's a lot they have to account for, and the racism and the xenophobia that has been ramped up to get this nation to vote Brexit. It just exposed them for so much of it has been unearthed. So it's a very difficult time, and I would encourage people to, as much as they can, speak out against it, definitely speak out against it, but also to remember that they need to apply some self-care, that these are difficult times and we need to survive, and sometimes that survival can look different to different people, and it's important to acknowledge that the harm of racism is very real for us on the front lines, and that we need to, you know, and connecting this to what we just spoke about with mental health, that we know that it affects our mental health, it affects our well-being, it affects our children, it affects our families, and we need to find a way of protecting ourselves, but also a way of fighting for our rights at the same time.
I am sure you will agree that it is unbelievable and disgusting that racism still exists in the 21st century. There was an incident which went viral recently. A Ryanair passenger, 77-year-old Delcy Gale, also racially abused by an old white man. The shocking thing was, the airline staff moved Delcy from her seat instead of the man, as he shouted, "If I tell her to get out, she gets out." Hodan, can you please tell us about your similar experience when visiting the Kaaba, and suggest how we could eradicate this level of sin?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Delcy Gale was treated so appallingly, and what was even more shocking was how the Ryanair staff comforted the racist David Mesher, and they were checking in on his well-being. He was not the one who was removed. He wasn't even removed from the flight, and you find that other people have been removed from flights for far less. You know, people. I think there was a story once of an algebra of a university academic reading a book on algebra, and he was accused of being a terrorist by people on the plane, who then called the authorities on him, and he was removed from this flight. People have been pulled out of planes for nothing, for racism, for Islamophobia, for a mixture of both of those. But what we're seeing is that racists are being given all the love and attention, while Delcy Gale had to suffer this, and then Ryanair was perfectly okay with giving. None of those staff members have been fired, as far as I'm aware. So yeah, it's the systemic nature of racism that is the most horrifying thing. It's bad enough that individuals are racist, but the way structurally that people are protected to continue to be racist is a violence upon violence. And the incident you referred to for me was what happened to me when I went on Hajj a few years back now. But I went to pray, and it was my first time seeing the Kaaba that in my Hajj. I'd been to Umrah as a very small child with my parents long time ago. So I'd seen the Kaaba then as an infant, but I was too busy chasing the cats that were, playing rather than focusing. I was about 6, I think, at the time. But this time I went as an adult, and it was Hajj, and it was obviously very, very important. It's supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I stood there, and as I was about to pray, when the adhan was called, this woman started to physically fight me because she didn't want my black body next to hers. She was a woman from the South Asian heritage, and it was horrible and violent for me. It was violent. She kicked me, she was shouting at me, and was pushing me away from standing in the rows. And obviously every Muslim will know that you pray in lines. You're supposed to be praying. So I won't bore you with the details, but I was very angry. I mean, at first I gave her excuses. I thought she was saving the place for someone else. But when I realized this was about me and about her not wanting me to pray next to her as if I was some kind of najas, you know, some kind of, you know, garbage, it made me so angry. And I shouted at her and said, no, I'm praying here, you know, no, and stood my ground and carried on praying. So, and I'm not alone. So many people have given, you know, examples of things that have happened to them. So many people I know witnessed things that were done by certain people in authority against black people who were, for example, begging in the Haram vicinity, and people who were beaten violently and things like that. So it's the things you hear and the things you witness because you're a black person is so, it's unrelenting. For me, it felt like I've just come to this spiritual place. I've come to this place. This is, you know, for the first time I was financially able to go after all the years of wishing it and praying it. And then to have that incident happen in that holiest of sites was extremely disappointing. And it takes a toll on you. These things take a toll on you.
Thank you very much for your amazing advice. Of course, we cannot do this interview without talking about Islamophobia. According to the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, there were 1,678 anti-Muslim hate crimes in the year up to January 2018. I am sure you are also aware of Boris Johnson's offensive remarks about the burqa and the pleas of many government officials to investigate this. Hodan, I know this may be an obvious question, but do you think politicians should be educated on differing cultures and have a stronger stance in protecting ethnic minorities?
I mean, I don't think I fully answered your previous question about how do we eradicate this sin. And I think, just briefly to answer that, people know. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, gave the last sermon, he spent a section of that sermon dedicated to talking about racism and how to eradicate that. And most Muslims I know have a copy of this sermon somewhere in their house, somewhere in their local mosque, somewhere they've come across it, they've learned it, they've studied it, where Muhammad sallallahu Rasulullah speaks very explicitly about the wrongs of racism, how wrong it is for people to believe that their color makes them better than another person. And in the same way, these people know when they're being Islamophobic. It's not an accident for the statistics that you read out, that nearly 1,600 plus, these are the crimes that have been reported. Think about all the things that haven't been reported. I know people who have had Islamophobic, attacks on them and have not reported it because they have no faith in the system. They have no faith that the police officers who come will deal with this and that the perpetrators will be caught and punished accordingly. There's a lot of a loss of faith in the system that we live in, because a lot of the racism that people suffer are experienced at the hands of the state as well. So, like you mentioned, Boris Johnson, he was a member of the state when he was saying these things, accusing us of, saying we look like bank robbers, Muslim women who wear niqabs, and it's just like, wow, nonsense. The nonsense and the violent nature of Islamophobia starts at the top. It starts with these politicians. It starts with them normalizing the othering and the demonization of Muslim people. And they will pick things like, and it's historically been the case, where they will pick on Muslim women in particular, and they'll pick on niqab wearing Muslim sisters. And they will use that as if almost to put a wedge as well between niqab wearing sisters and the rest of us. So some people in the community, Muslim communities, might think, oh, it's not about us, they're not talking about us, they're talking about women who cover their face. They're not talking about women who cover their face, they mean Muslims. And they're using, women who as a excuse to demonize the entirety of Muslims and Islam. And they know exactly what they're doing. And I don't for 1 minute think that it's an accident that these people accidentally say these things. They stumble upon Islamophobia, they stumble upon racism, and they just happen to accidentally say these things. This is very calculated and is designed to speak to their populations and their policymakers. And you find that that's what happens, that when these things are said, the spike will go up in anti-Muslim crimes. And also at the same time, you'll find that policies will be changed, and then suddenly we're having deportations, and Muslim people who are born and raised in this country who have no other place to go, having their citizenships taken away from them, or threatened with having their citizenships taken away from them. You'll have the laws that apply to Muslims and only Muslims about being the TPIMs, which have now been modified, where people are being effectively kept under house arrest and not being able to access the internet or see certain people. There's a lot of other laws that are passed as well as the things that we hear about. So we have a lot of things to deal with as communities in this country, and when you are a member of a black communities, where you're a member of also the Muslim community, a lot of these things impact you doubly. So there's no rest sometimes. It's tiring. It seems like there's no rest for us, because you're fighting one battle after another, constantly trying to just assert yourself as a human being in systems that are determined to take away our humanity.
Thank you for that insightful advice. I hope we can come together as an Ra and educate people on our religion. We have sadly come to the end of the interview. But before we go, I would like to get your perspectives on artificial intelligence. According to UN calculations, there are over 7 billion of us. The current average population increase is estimated at 63 million per year. The Guardian states a third of jobs in London will be taken over by robots in the next 20 years. Do you think companies will be more unreasonable to humanity by replacing people with robots in the workforce in future?
I think we're going in that direction. I think we're going in that direction, and I'm quite old, so when I was growing up, the cartoons that we saw and the films that we saw, where robots are going to take over the world and take over and kill us all, But actually, what's happening is that in capitalist societies, they will be looking at the dollars is the only thing that that these corporations and organizations care about. That profit is where it's at. Profit speaks, and if it's in their interest to not, if a robot breaks down, you replace it with another robot. If a person breaks down, they'll sue you. Like it will. If something, people have rights, robots don't. And I think it's also quick speed. You can produce more with robots. If you think about the assembly line and how we've moved from the way the production worked in the past to how we can have things very, very quickly. Sometimes I watch TV shows. I know I'm boring. There's a show called How It's Made, or how they're made, and I don't know if it still runs, but I've seen a few of those episodes where they'll take an item, for example, the vinyl record or a bicycle or something, and say this is how it's made, and they'll take you through the whole process. And it would be virtually impossible to produce the things that we consume and use without robots. I'm being honest, that we need robots in manufacturing to be able to produce the things that we live and need, machinery and things like that. But whether that comes at a cost for us is only the future will tell. But I definitely think that we're heading in that direction, and I think companies will just be looking at what is most profitable. And I hope that we get to a place where robots aren't taking over the world and killing us all. Who knows?
This is a fascinating topic to me, because especially I am a motivational speaker going in schools. Humanity is expanding like ever before. And it scares me, if we have this technology with such an expanding humanity, where would they get jobs, including the older people? But, inshallah, I guess, Allah will take care. But inshallah, I guess Allah will take care of everything.
Yes, inshallah. You're right.
We have come to the end of the interview. Hodan, I think we all have been inspired by your poetry, as it is very thought-provoking. Maybe I could have you back in my hot seat in the next coming year.
Yes.
Before we go, can you please tell the viewers where they can access your poetry collection?
Oh, my poetry collection is underway. So what I need is everyone watching this to pray for me, that it works out and that it comes out as soon as possible. And as soon as I have that information, I will give it to you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Miss Hodan Yusuf.
Thank you. Thank you.